Hi, welcome to the Backyard Road Trips podcast. I'm Zack.
I'm Jim.
And here we are talking with Irene. Yes.
Whiskey Mentors and Canterbury Liquors.
Yes. So Irene Tan from Whiskey Mentors and Canterbury Liquors. And she's here to impart some knowledge to us this fine day about whiskey.
Maybe.
Well, first of all, thanks for coming onto our show, our humble little podcast here. We are very grateful that you took some time with us this morning.
Absolutely.
And hosting us.
Yes, I know.
We come to you. This is a beautiful store.
We're going to have to wait till noontime to taste, but this would be way more fun if we were able to taste it.
Excellent. So starting off, I know, Jim, you've been a big whiskey fan for years.
Yes, I'm a whiskey enthusiast, and I don't know how I didn't know that you were so close to where I live, because I would travel forever to find something good, and this is like Mecca for me right now. So
That's good to hear.
yeah.
Irene, what got you into whiskey in the first place?
Well, actually, I had too many bottles of wine in my basement, and I think it was 1,200 bottles of wine. And
Oh, wow.
I looked one day and I go, I think I need a store.
Mm-hmm.
So
1,200 bottles of wine?
yeah.
So you are a collector.
No,
No?
I'm a wine drinker.
Wow.
So I don't have a ton of time. So I usually, when I can buy things more in bulk,
Mm-hmm.
I do, because to me it saves time, and and that way I don't have to run out.
Right.
I mean, during the pandemic, I would have been all set. I had 1,200 bottles of wine in my basement. So anyway, so I partnered with this guy from the Brooklyn store, and so he was more the wine guy, and he said, well, I'll take care of the whiskeys. And that was just in 2014.
Okay.
And the rest is kind of history, because I was working in Franklin, Mass at the time.
Oh, okay.
And I just went to every tasting I could go to in Massachusetts at least a couple times a week.
Right.
So in a year, tasted way more whiskey than a person should. But I learned very quickly you taste and spit, because I still had a long drive home. So
Right.
so that's kind of how it all got started.
Wow. Okay. So what were you doing before that?
So I'm still doing that.
Yeah.
So this is my my retirement hobby, I like to call it. So I'm a software consultant. I've been for 30 something years.
Okay.
So that's my day job.
Yep.
That's the stuff that keeps everything running fine.
Right. Right.
But so this has just became a kind of fun thing, and then it's
Yeah.
just sort of seeing how whiskey sort of take off. I would say probably 2016, 17, when I could see that things were really escalating in the whiskey world. I'm like, dang, I should stay in this, because number one, I enjoy it. I learned to really appreciate it. So as far as, the tons of people like who drink whiskey have been drinking whiskey forever. For me, I'm really 2014 is my first intro to, any real whiskey.
Right.
Other than maybe I had some Johnny Walker Blue when I was younger, once, twice maybe, and that's it. So
Right.
so quickly developed a palate for it, and very fortunate to have been born with a decent nose and palate, and so that helps.
Right.
Do you remember what like your first whiskey was that you're like, oh, I like whiskey, I'm going to go into...
I don't think there was anything that just kind of stood out. It was just, taste. To me, it's kind of like food, right?
Yeah.
You try new foods that you've never had before, and you're like, oh, this is kind of interesting. I could, maybe have this and with a certain food or something like that. So it just sort of evolved. It wasn't, like one whiskey. Like for some people I know, it's like, oh my God, I had that whiskey, and it's like, a revelation. For me, it was just, oh, this is something, kind of like wine I could have with food. And that's sort of how it developed.
So did you ever have like a whiskey that you were just like, oh, that's amazing, or that's terrible, or did you have a pretty neutral palate?
All of the above.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, there are some pretty really, really amazing whiskeys out there. A lot of good everyday whiskey, I would say, and then there are some that are just not well made. And it's not like a terrible whiskey out there, but they're just not well made.
Right.
So
You're a level 3 sommelier. Is that so? Is that for whiskey?
for whiskey,
Yeah.
yeah.
When did you get into that?
So it's funny, actually. I went, because in the wine world, obviously, there's all of those levels, and I was like, there must be something in the whiskey world, and so I started looking, and at the very same time, I saw that out in Austin they had a school.
Oh, cool.
I was like, oh man, do I really want? Is this for real? Should I do this or
Right,
not?
yeah.
So I was like, I don't know. Well, think about it. I mean, had I had my own store by then, I would have just done it. But since it wasn't my money to spend, so to speak, I was like, well, I'll think about it. So I waited for this, I think it was the second or the third class, when I said, you know what, I think I'm just going to go do this. if nothing else, it's just to just kind of broaden, the horizon on whiskeys and meeting other people in whiskeys. So that's kind of 2017, 2018 time frame. Yeah. And then it just like happened, like right in a row. I just really enjoyed the very first class that I took, level 1. So it's a marketing school, number one, but it's filled with just amazing people teaching the course and just the people who actually take the course. But the campus itself is very inspiring.
Yeah.
So highly recommend for and not a plug for them, whatever, but definitely anybody who is into whiskey and kind of wants to geek out about it and stuff. You should just go there. Or if you want to just be inspired. So for me, yes, I went there to learn about whiskey and stuff, but there was something about being on campus was so inspiring that, it literally, it's just like a portal just opens in your mind and you get creative. I don't know how. It's like a little vortex of energy there. So
that's cool.
Can you share like what were some of like the huge takeaways? Like, did you learn something like that really blew your mind when you were?
So it was a few years ago now. I think what it was probably my main takeaway was that being there and just talking with whiskey with people who are very passionate about it just made it so that it's like it just opened up your world to wow, there's a whole world of really cool stuff out there to be explored, to get creative with. And then I think for me what was good was because I was already doing whiskey in my store. I was doing tastings and stuff with people and helping to build community already because people would come to my tastings, they wouldn't know each other and they'd meet at my tasting enough times that they're like, hey, we need to get together after.
Oh, that's cool.
So to me, that's really, I mean, when you think about it, it's really kind of unlikely, right? Like a retailer, a liquor retailer can somehow affect local community.
Right.
So to me, that was like, wow, this is really kind of cool. And then going to the school and meeting people who are all also sharing whiskey. And it's like, wow, this is something that a movement that I really want to continue to be involved in.
Yeah. Now, do you have a favorite style of whiskey?
I don't.
Okay.
So it depends on the day, the food I'm eating, the company I'm with, right? It just has to be good whiskey.
Right.
I don't, there's not a particular style that I go, oh, I don't like that as much. And people always ask, can you pick one? And it's like, pick your favorite kid when you have 5 of them. You can't, right? On any given day, one's going to be better than the other.
The one that's not crying.
Exactly, yeah. So no favorite whiskeys. I like good whiskeys.
All right, well, we'll talk about bad whiskeys. You want to name and shame some bad whiskeys that you're like, you can't pay me to drink that?
Well, no. So to me, so I appreciate what goes into making a whiskey, right? I mean, even though I know I'm too old and too poor to make it myself, but there's a lot of money that gets spent making a whiskey, good or bad, right? But good or bad is also very subjective, right? It's if your palate likes a certain style, then and the style that's presented to you is not what you like, then it's not as bad whiskey. It's just it's not well made to your palate. It doesn't suit your palate.
Very good answer.
Thank you.
All right, so obviously whiskey can get very expensive.
Yes.
And then there's either people who say, oh, that's too much hype, I'm not paying that. Or there's people who say, this is the best whiskey ever. Of course you think it's the best whiskey ever. You spent $500 on it. All right, is there a whiskey that you think is absolutely worth the money, even though it's expensive?
That's a good question, by the way.
So actually, there are a lot of whiskeys that are pricey. So some of it you pay because of the advertisement, right? Some distilleries spend a lot of money advertising, and yes, so you have to contribute towards that for the bottle of that whiskey. But is there one that's absolutely? So probably the one that I recall not that long ago drinking that I thought, wow, this is really kind of good. I don't know what the price is now anymore, but at the time it was about $1,000. Was the Lefroy 32 year.
Wow.
So that I was like, wow, because that one I didn't even want to taste because it just smells so good,
Interesting.
So a good whiskey like that, definitely. You want to just, for me anyway, I want to kind of smell for half an hour before I even taste it.
Right.
Oh, sure.
And so it's more of an experience. And the other one that I actually have had that's super expensive at the time, it wasn't expensive. So it's expensive is kind of relative, right? So one of my really good customers in my Brooklyn store has shared with me a Kurosawa from the 80s.
Wow.
Brand new bottle. He promised me, I'm going to bring you something fun to taste for Christmas. And we did. And same thing, we nosed it for a good 20 minutes before we even tasted it, and now that bottle sells for thousands of dollars.
Wow.
So was it worth it when I tasted it at what he bought it for? Absolutely.
Right.
So it's, I think more important, I think, rather than the how expensive a whiskey is who you're sharing it with, right? So it could be a $20 bottle, it could be $1,000 bottle. It's who you're sharing it with. It's what makes the story for your whiskey.
Oh, wow. That's
It's got all these quotes that are going to go in the book.
But it's so interesting because even though I'm currently writing about spirits, typically beer has been my kind of go-to.
Yep.
I feel like there'll be so many times that, you'll be out somewhere and have, be with really great company and have this beer that's just like, oh, this is the best beer I've ever tasted. And then you go have it on your own.
And you're like, it's just okay.
Yeah, it's just okay.
I don't remember it right. Yeah.
Exactly,
So the whole thing of it is, which is why, to me, yes, if you have the means to buy a super expensive whiskey, I mean, yes, aged whiskey that is well made and well aged, right? It is going to taste phenomenal, right? Because there's something about certain Scotches in particular that when it has seen enough time in the barrel and it's all of the right environment, yes, you can never replace that. You can't sort of try and hurry it up. I mean, it's different. Like a whiskey in Texas, right? It's hot over there, even in Australia or in Tel Aviv, right, where I bought barrels from all these people. It's hot and everything happens really quickly. So it's a different style of whiskey. It doesn't mean it's bad. It's equally enjoyable, very big and powerful in its own way. So to me, it always centers around who you're sharing your whiskey with.
Yeah. Now, even though basically the question I'm going to be asking is kind of be contradicting what was just said, kind of. But do you have different brands that you are altogether partial to, that you think everything they make is really just fantastic across the board? Or is there...
That's kind of tough to say because it would be very subjective for me, though,
of course,
right?
yeah.
So, most of the whiskeys that I have in here, at some point in time, I have not liked something they made.
Okay.
Usually in the beginning when they're first starting.
Yeah.
So a case in point would be the Garrison Brothers, which are about 18 barrels off. So when I first met Dan way back in 2014, I tasted the whiskey and I'm like, not quite there yet, but this is the brand I need to follow because there's something about that whiskey that called out to me. Everywhere else like, it's too young, blah, blah, blah. You don't make a whiskey in Texas. I'm like, no. There's something good that I need to follow. Right. And so next thing you know, I bought my first barrel. I can't remember what year it is, but I remember the barrel number. That's more important to me. 3434. And, so I bought one barrel and the next thing you know, I bought two more barrels and then they just got really better at what they did because they were still learning, right? So for me, I like that I kind of evolve with the whiskey maker.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And same thing with Kings County. When they first came out, they were really, really small bottles and they were very small barrels and all they tasted was a hunk of wood. And I'm like, man, I can't taste this stuff. This is terrible, right? And, fast forward to, I think it was spring of, late winter of 2020, just before the pandemic hit. I was up at a tasting up north and I tasted their rye and I was like, oh my God, this is really good.
Right.
And so I said, how many do you have left in Connecticut? How many cases? And they're like, 3 or 4. Well, I'll take all of them. And so that kind of started my relationship with Kings County. I was like, wow, because they weren't good before, but now they are. Yeah. Right. And I mean, my first barrel sold out in a month. My second barrel will sell out as soon as it's available. So, it's I like to grow with the distillery, so to speak.
I love the idea that you are buying your own barrels too. That is so very cool.
Yeah, I mean, lots of people buy barrels. People. So I always say, look, anybody can. If you have the money, you can buy a barrel. I don't buy a barrel because I need to buy one. I buy one because I want to buy one because it tastes so good to me, right? And one of my whiskey somm friends, Cliff, had made a point that your whiskey barrels are just not your everyday whiskey barrels. Right? Everyone is just a little bit one notch to the left, to the right, above, whatever it is. It's just different. You don't buy the run-of-the-mill stuff, and I'm like, why would I? Right? If you're going to invest in a whole barrel, it needs to be something special. And I have named every single one of my barrels since I came here. Actually, no, my first barrel I named was my last Whistle Pig barrel, which was number 5. I named it Irene's Winter Warmer. So that was the start of me naming the whiskeys, and I started doing that because. I get very personal with my barrels, right? Because for me, if I buy a barrel and nobody else likes it, I need to like it enough to drink it for the next 3 years. Right?
Yeah.
So I take it really seriously. So I basically, it's a very, very intimate relationship I have with my barrel of whiskey. So that's why I name every single one of them. So that when I taste them in the morning, usually I name them first thing in the morning, a day or two after I pick the barrel, when my palate's really clean. first thing in the morning before I do anything else. I actually taste it and name it and get on with the day. Because later part of the day, there are very few barrels that just kind of pop out and go, that's what you need to name it. The recent one, when we did the Kings County pick, like cupcake, and that's what I wanted to name it. And that was what but that's rare. Usually, I like to really kind of taste all the different nuances of the whiskey before I name it. So what's nice for me is that now my customers don't say, your blah, blah, blah barrel or whatever. They'll go, your bittersweet brownie. And we all know exactly whose distillery and what it is, right? Or, your the honey buns or, the Christmas cake. And so it's, for me, it's easy to identify, which barrel it is, what number it is. So I started numbering my barrels. We don't have any special logo or whatever. It always just says Whisky Mentors, QS, whatever the number is, which is how many barrels I've purchased from that distillery. As a reminder to me and to them, when I go pick my next barrel, that, hey, I'm here to pick barrel number blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So it's kind of cool that way.
That is.
I understand there's probably some variations from barrel to barrel.
Yes.
Do you get to try out the barrel that you're getting first?
Yes.
Yeah?
So I actually get to reject a lot of barrels.
Oh, excellent.
So the whole point of picking barrels is a lot of times, during COVID it's a little bit difficult to travel to do it, but I prefer to actually go out and pick the barrels. I mean, they'll send you samples, sometimes they send you amazing samples, right? But sometimes it's nice to just be able to be there. It takes a lot of time, but because it's a part-time, gig for me,
right?
And I just take time off from, my other commitments and I go pick the barrel because then it makes it that much more personal. But by the same token now, and I have explained to a few of my customers, like, you don't have to explain to us, we get it. It's like, so, like say a bottle of, the Starlight Rye here could cost $5 less elsewhere. It wouldn't be the same barrel. It may be the same finish and everything, but it's the barrel that I picked. So they understand that because I took the time off to go do that, with all the travel costs and all that. So my bottle is going to be a few dollars more. And they're like, yeah, we don't really care, right? Because we trust your palate. And so that's kind of how, we roll with it.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, how many of all the other stores that do some sort of barrel program, like I doubt they're a sommelier,
Yeah. I mean, I'm still kind of new in the game, right? I mean, I really am. I mean, even though, so overall, I think I picked probably almost 90 something barrels from my other store to here. But just here alone, we've purchased 67 barrels in 2.5 years, which is a little mind blowing. But
yeah, that was during a pandemic.
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
To add that to the mix there.
Yep.
Do you do your own bottlings too, or do they bottle for you?
So mostly they bottle for you. I do occasionally go out and bottle for the fun of it. My first Garrison barrel, I actually went out to bottle because I pre-sold it before it ever got bottled. So what's nice was I had a list of customers and I said, all right, they're all going to be, every bottle's going to be numbered. So if you call to pay for it, if you prepay and buy it, it's this price. If there's any left, which I doubt there will be, it will be this price. So in less than 2 weeks, I sold out the barrel. A small barrel, but still, it's 29 bottles, really expensive whiskey. But everyone got to get their number and what they wanted Donis, the master distiller, to sign on the bottle.
That's
Wow.
awesome.
So that was very cool. Yeah.
That is really cool.
Yeah, and I've gone up to Boston Harbor Distillery also to bottle. I think I know Rhonda had filmed some of that. So it's pretty fun to do it once, but for the experience of doing it. But as far as when your barrels are 200, 300 bottles, you're just like, yeah, no, somebody else can.
Yeah.
Let some machine do that part of it.
Right. So with Boston Harbor Distillery, what's your relationship been with?
Really great. So I think it was in 2017, I believe, when Rhonda had called me out of the blue and says, hey, kind of woman-to-woman business, want to come visit and said, let me show you what we have, not to buy a barrel, whatever. I'm like, sure. So I show up, and I never show up to the distillery empty-handed. That's just bad manners, as far as I'm concerned. Because to me, I always want to be able to share what I have. And also, if I don't find what I like at your distillery, I have an example of this is what I like.
Right.
Not that what you're making is bad, it's just not my style.
Sure.
So I brought some samples up, so we tasted through, a bunch of stuff, and I believe I'm the first person in taste in the Rick House. So they pulled 6 barrels aside, for me to taste. Wow. So the very first barrel I tasted was barrel number 56. Remember it fondly because as soon as I smelled it, I was like, wow, this is really amazing. And so I said, put my name on that barrel, but keep it for a year because I don't think it's ready yet.
Okay.
So it's a 95.5 rye, and it was this beautiful barrel from A&K that barrel really kind of spoke to me because it imparted so much flavor in just a year and a half. It imparted so much flavor to that whiskey that was like, wow, that's really, really cool. So sure enough, 364 days later, she delivered my barrel with all the bottles.
Wow.
And so that's kind of how we got started. And so then I went back and picked barrel 2, which is a few bottles left because I kind of not sell too many of those because I only have a few bottles left. And then to name, first one I did name because that was before I started naming barrels, but I had to name it. I would have named that my Rambunctious Rye because it was 122 proof and it just danced on your tongue, but it was really, really tasty for something that was 2.5 years old to be resting in Boston to taste that good to me. I was like, wow, I was really excited about it. The second barrel that I picked, I named it Stay a While because it's 127.4 proof. Stay a while for a couple of reasons. If somebody poured some for you and you liked it, you stick around for a while. And due to the high proof, after a few sips, you should stick around for a while.
I assume all your barrels are cask strength then?
Yes, with the exception of some of the big distilleries that won't let you buy cask strength, like Knob Creek. I think my Elijah Craig small batch, obviously, and my Fighting 69, which I named Felix Felicis because at 80 proof it shouldn't taste that good, and it does. So, but the rest of them, pretty much everything is at cask.
Beautiful.
And so you sell Boston Harbor, and you said Bully Boy as well.
Yes.
Too for and then Whistle Pig from Vermont.
Yep.
So.
And I just picked 2 barrels from Mad River Distillers.
Oh yeah, from Vermont.
I picked a rum barrel and a rye barrel. So it's nice to keep it local. I mean, it's great that people in the Northeast region are making good whiskey.
Yes.
All the good spirits, actually, in general. I also have a gin coming from Bar Hill.
Oh, yes.
A barrel-aged gin from them.
Yeah, that's excellent.
And then hopefully by noontime, we can get to taste a little sample of my barrel-aged gin.
Oh, wow.
So I went up to Boston Harbor Distillery. They have a Lawley's gin, which I started really like that, but we can't get it in Connecticut yet. God knows why. So politics. But I said, well, you know what? I want a barrel-aged version of it. So that's how we're going to get into the States. So I went up to tweak the current botanical list that they have. Add a little extra ginger, a little extra blood orange. And we tweaked it so that it could age in my Elijah Craig barrel-proof barrel.
Okay.
And it's pretty damn good right now.
Nice.
Very excited about it.
So were you working with John?
Yes,
from there?
with John.
So,
Yeah, John's awesome.
He is great. So
we had a lot of fun. He's like, well, what botanicals do you want? And I'm like, well, so this my Elijah Craig barrel is like full of dark cherries and stuff. So I wanted the gin with notes so that you could maybe do like a Kentucky Mule kind of, in the gin form or a Negroni that was more like an old-fashioned style, so hence the extra fresh orange. But I wanted to tweak a ginger to just kind of spike it a little bit. And so they just recently, actually just a few days ago, sent me samples of the unaged and the aged for 6-7 weeks, or whatever it is. Yeah. And what a difference! I mean, I love the unaged the way it is. If I didn't have the barrel to age it in, but the barrel finish, just those few weeks. The mouthfeel is so much better, and the flavors are so much more concentrated and delicious. So somebody had given a taster yesterday, said, so how many bottles is it going to be? Because you're always going to proof it down. I'm like, heck no. No, we're going to do like full Navy strength and then some. Whatever the food comes out to be is what it's going to be. Because to me, I feel like when there's always this question about, should you put ice in your whiskey? Should you put water in it and all that? Yeah. Drink it the way you like it.
Right.
But me personally, I feel like there are very few whiskeys. I can't remember anything of recent, the last 2 years, that I thought tasted better with water.
Okay.
Because what happens is when you add water, at least for my palate, is that yes, it makes the nose smell way better, right? There's a lot more different aromas get released, but the flavor tends to get diluted such that all I'm getting is alcohol, right? And you lose a mouthfeel.
Yes.
Basically. So that's why I don't do it.
Right.
But I mean, lots of people do it, and it's fine. I mean, that's how you like drink your whiskey. It's great.
Right.
If I'm gonna, add anything to it, is when I make it into a cocktail.
Sure.
Right. So if I'm drinking a Manhattan, one of my favorite cocktails, then you can drop ice in it and all kinds of whatever, and then it's fine because now you're not just drinking the whiskey for what the pure taste of the whiskey is.
Now, this is my question for you. So just doing the research that I've been doing lately about making the history of spirits in New England in general. I mean, rum was the spirit du jour before whiskey, and having it really being the Boston area and coastal areas being the rum hotbed.
Mhm.
Now, what's been interesting for me is whenever I think of rum, I think of like the super, sweet Captain Morgan or
Yep.
something like this. And so I would never really gravitate towards a rum because that doesn't really hit my palate in the
Yep.
right way. But with a lot of the rum that I've had from the local distilleries in the Boston area, having just much more of a bourbon quality to it, given that
Yep.
there's no added sugar. It's made from the molasses that has, and I know that some distilleries that don't have a bourbon or don't have them yet have been making a rum old fashioned or something like that.
Yep.
That's been. Do you have any thoughts of rum in general? Or
Yeah, so I was never a huge rum fan. Same thing because I was kind of exposed only to the regular run-of-the-mill rums out there. They use those mixers, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And a lot of it is also not well made. I guess is the best way to put it. But I do love the sipping rums, like Foursquare. They make awesome rums. In fact, speaking of rum, I actually did buy a rum barrel from Barbados. It's a plantation rum, single cask.
Oh, wow.
Absolutely delicious. You can just sip on it, and life is good.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's rum from molasses and also rum from rum agricole. So more of the French influence. Usually it's spelled with the rum with the H. So those are definitely has a little bit more of a vegetal note to it for me, but I like it because I grew up, on eating sugarcane. So when I taste a rum agricole rum, I'm like, oh yeah, I kind of get that,
Oh yeah.
So it's pretty neat. So yeah, no. So rums, I think, in the same way that people sip whiskey, there are a lot of good rums out there that you can actually sip. They're not just
Yeah.
cloyingly sweet, right?
No.
You don't. I don't necessarily want to put like a Foursquare rum in a cocktail.
Right.
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 But by the same token, if I was going to make a cocktail, I'm not going to make it with Captain Morgan either. All right. So my thing is, if you're going to have a cocktail, why would you not use the best ingredients?
Right.
So if I was going to make a rum cocktail, yes, I will. Whatever I have that's a good sipping rum to make a cocktail with it.
Right. That's been one of the most profound, things in my research is just seeing, because again, rum for me just didn't have any connotations that I, not that I didn't like it, but I just wouldn't. Yeah, it's a means to an end of having a tropical drink, right? So
Yeah, no, but when they're aged for a long time in ex-bourbon barrels,
right.
then it starts to get all of the, as a whiskey drinker, you start to recognize all the notes. You're like,
Yeah, it
hey,
really
this is really
is.
kind of good, right? And you slap somebody on your little barbecue or something, and life is good.
Right. Now, for just so folks that are listening could know a little bit about your store and what you do here and how they could get a hold of you and come sample and buy.
Yeah.
And
So we don't advertise. The only advertisement we have is the Whiskey Trip video that they did for me. The top 8 things at a liquor store and what to do about it. So no need to advertise because, well, number one, we're very small, obviously. I mean, we're like 1,000 square feet in our retail space. The tasting space, obviously, not retail space, is a little spot. Was very, very good for us during pandemic because we couldn't really taste on the retail side, right? Because there's just so many people come in, but people will make appointments with me. So that's what most people do because I'm usually here only Fridays and Saturdays.
Right.
Because I've got a day job. I've got other things to do.
Right.
So Friday afternoons, typically from noon or 1 o'clock till closing, or lately since till 5 only, because I've kind of sort of trained my customers to come see me when I'm here.
Right.
So it's by appointment. And it was funny. A friend of mine said, "What kind of liquor store do you have to go visit by appointment only?" I said, "Well, this is not just any liquor store."
No, it's not.
True.
Yeah. So people make appointments with me. My staff is very good at handing out my card and going, if you have, you need to come and taste with her. Right. So I tell people, look, you can text me any time of day and night, whatever. Reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook. We don't have a website.
Right.
Eventually we might, but I'm not keen on having one.
If it's working for you this way,
yeah, right.
then,
Exactly. And we don't ship because it's just too much of a
Right.
hassle.
Yeah.
Because I feel like this place is a destination. So I want people to come out and visit, right? And so just going to reach out to me and either give me a text, Instagram or Facebook and say, hey, and I think on Facebook you can make an appointment.
Oh, perfect.
That I can then say, based on how busy my calendar is, I can reschedule or whatever.
Right.
And typically it's, half an hour to 45 minutes. And I don't like to have more than 10 people in here at a time if I'm doing a tasting, just because it gets a little bit too, it just maybe just, because of the pandemic still,
Right.
I mean, it's still, still
Oh,
not
yeah.
great out there.
Yeah.
It's good to just kind of keep it a smaller group
Sure.
and then that way it doesn't throw it away. not what people would think. It's not a drunken fest. It's more about a conversation about what you like and don't like,
Right.
what you're trying to explore.
Mm-hmm.
And so typically we'll taste maybe, about 6. We can't do more than 10 at a time anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, 6 to 8 whiskeys, just a little taste, and we'll talk about, and if you say you like a certain style, but you don't like this, for me, it's always a nice challenge for me when somebody goes, I'm only Scotch drinker, I don't drink anything else. And I'm like, no, you really enjoy this rye because
Right.
blah, 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 blah. And then they try it and they run home with 3 bottles of rye. And I'm like, okay, I've done my job. So that for me is really, really kind of fun to really help. So I used to be a teacher in my other life years ago.
Really?
Yeah, so I think I kind of coming full circle eventually in retirement is to teach again.
Oh, that's neat.
Whatever I'm teaching. I used
Were
to
you-
teach English and phys ed years
Did you
ago.
teach locally? Or?
No, I taught overseas.
Oh, wow.
And
okay.
so, being in this business, at least for me, this side of the business is about teaching.
Right.
But I also learn,
Yes.
right? Because I don't claim to know everything. I don't. People are like, oh, you're the expert. I'm like, no, not really. Because every conversation I have with people, I learn something new,
Mm-hmm.
right? You just need to learn to listen. And hear what they're trying to say. And you'd be surprised how much you actually learn when you think you already know most things. They're like, oh no, I didn't know that. And that's really kind of cool. So it's always a two-way conversation. It's always about building a relationship with your customer. Not it's not all about like you don't see any prices over here, right? Because when you come here to do a tasting, it's more about the tasting experience.
Right.
Right. And lots of people are so used to what's this cost? What's that cost? I'm like,
Yes.
let's talk about it after. I'm not trying to hide it. It's all the prices next door,
Sure.
right? But let's taste it first, because if I told you I'm gonna open this bottle for you, it's $1,000 bottle. Just so you're most likely gonna like it, right?
Right.
Or try to like it, right? Whereas if I said that's only a $20 bottle, you're like, and it could be the best bottle I have in here.
Right.
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 So it's definitely when you come in here, it's a good learning exchange.
And this is now Whiskey Mentors. Is that?
Yeah, so Whisky Mentors is actually the consulting side of my business, right? Canterbury Liquors is the physical store, retail location. Whiskey Mentors is something that I kind of started doing before I had Canterbury Liquors as a way of consulting, because I'm a consultant in the IT world. So in the whiskey world, same thing for me. So I'm starting to sort of kind of work with some distilleries to potentially blend some stuff.
Oh,
I
very
was going to
cool.
ask. It sounds like you would be great for blending your own, since you get so many that you could choose from.
Yeah, so actually we do a lot of that here. It's really
Really?
funny because my Garrison Brothers barrels, I usually buy 2 or 3 or 4 at a time, and sometimes 5. And so they taste really good by themselves. But certain barrels, for me, I feel like they're barrels 9 and 10 in particular. I wanted to buy them to be blended. They're pretty good by themselves. So number 9 was Sweet Hot Cocoa, and number 10 was Cinnamon Toast. And so by themselves are pretty good, but blended, magic happens. I call it Garrison Magic Happens. And, some of the parts is just so much better. And so I show people that. I'm like, look, I'm not doing it to make you buy 2 bottles. Obviously, you can just buy one of each.
Yeah.
But let me show you, when you taste them, we talk about what you're tasting in 9, and we talk about what you're tasting in 10. And we'll put the 2 together, like swirl around and wait about 5 minutes, and then taste it. And it's just, for me, I love watching people's eyes light up like, oh my God, what is this? I'm like, so, they go, oh, sure, now we're going to buy 2 bottles. And I'm like, yeah, if you want to recreate that taste,
Yeah,
right,
but it's
right.
just really kind of fun, because not just sharing with whiskey with people. I also want people to drink whiskey more responsibly. Not just go get drunk. Like experiment with your whiskey. Get intimate with it and play with it. Because you can make good whiskey too. So.
Awesome.
That's
How much is a tasting if someone wanted to book with
So
you?
if somebody says, look, I've got a group 10 people, and we want your undivided attention for an hour or whatever it is, right? Then that's, depending on what we're doing, then I'll charge a certain amount, right? 'Cause cost of the bottles and whatever.
Yeah, sure.
But typically, if you want to just drop in for, to explore a few things, I think I have single barrel picks, new ones or whatever. It costs anything.
Oh, great.
Because I don't really want people to drop, $100 on a bottle and go, oh, I don't really like that.
Right,
So a little taste, and literally a little taste. And people who know, I mean, a little quarter ounce or less goes a long way,
All
right?
right,
Because
right.
you just need the gist of it. You're gonna like it or you're not gonna like it. But if I pour you a little sample and you knock it back, that'll be the last time I pour for you. Because I'll be like, oh yeah, let's see what we got on the
You're
bottom
not
shelf. That's
enjoying
really
this,
not
right?
exactly. So
Yeah.
you've not just wasted my whiskey.
No, exactly right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so.
Zach said that he was doing a tasting for one of the ones he was just at, and they were giving him these huge pours, and it was
Yeah.
just like, no, that's not how you
That's
enjoy this.
no,
No.
because then what happens is your palates get so jaded, Like, so when I go and pick barrels of whiskey, sometimes I tell them no more than 20. 20 is my max, right? So I can taste, up to 20 of them. But very quickly, I already eliminate the ones I never have to go back to taste.
Right.
Right. So generally, I'll narrow it down to 3 and go, I only need to go back and taste these. And pretty much I taste and spit, because even if that little bit, even if it's a quarter ounce that you swallow, well, you got 20 of them. Now you've had a few ounces of it, and you can't really be objective anymore.
Yeah.
And your palate's just done.
Right.
So
this has been
Oh,
fantastic.
wow. We hit our time with you,
just,
just like right on time.
I feel like I've learned so much.
Oh, me too. This was a real treat. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on to our show. Thanks again for listening to the Backyard Road Trips podcast. I'm Zach.
I'm Jim.
Irene?
And you can find us at backyardroadtrips.com, on social media at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and on any podcast platform.